Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The vast emptiness of space beyond Earth's atmosphere had never felt so close, so threatening. For weeks now, Tony Stark had been tracking strange energy signatures emanating from the far reaches of the galaxy, right from the edge of known space. At first, the readings were dismissed as background noise or anomalies, but Stark knew better. He recognized the signatures for what they truly were, a warning, and now the warning had become a threat. Stark leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes as he stared at the glowing holograms floating before him. His lab in New York was cluttered with the usual pieces of unfinished tech, a half-drunk coffee mug, and the ever-present hum of advanced machinery. But it wasn't the clutter that was getting to him today. It was the weight of responsibility. Jarvis Stark muttered, "Run the latest scans from deep space. I want an update on that energy cluster." The AI responded in its usual calm, British accented voice already on its side. "The energy signatures have increased in intensity. Their trajectory remains aimed at Earth, estimated arrival 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Stark gritted his teeth. Time was slipping away faster than he could prepare. Just then the door to the lab slid open, and the familiar figure of Clark Kent, Superman, stepped inside. He moved with that same easy grace, the kind that spoke of strength barely contained. Even without the cape and suit, Clark exuded an aura of quiet authority. "You've been tracking it too?" Clark asked, his deep voice laced with concern. "Of course I have. We both know what's coming, and it's not pretty." Stark gestured at the holograms. "This isn't some minor skirmish. It's a full-scale invasion." Clark nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. "We need to act now. Earth's self-defenses aren't ready for something of this magnitude." "That's why you were here," Stark replied, standing up. "We need to assemble a new team, Clark. The old guard we're not enough anymore." Clark glanced around the lab, taking in the mess of Stark's work. He knew Tony was right. They couldn't face this alone. Earth needed more than just 2 seasoned heroes. It needed fresh blood, new heroes willing to carry the torch into an uncertain future. "And who exactly do you have in mind?" Clark asked. Stark smirked. "I've already been keeping tabs on some potential. Young, untested, but they've got promise. They just need the right guidance. Our guidance." Clark crossed his arms. "We'll have to do more than guide them. And all of you will need to inspire them, show them what it means to be heroes, to carry the weight of the world on their shoulder." Stark's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. So, you..." Clark gave a small smile, one that conveyed more than words ever could. "Always." The recruiting process wasn't as easy as Stark had hoped. Young heroes weren't exactly clamoring to be trained by legends, especially legends with reputations like Tony Stark. Still, he and Clark managed to gather a small team of promising individuals, though they each came with their own set of challenges. First was Ariel, a young woman with the ability to manipulate light and energy. Her power was raw, untamed, but she lacked confidence. Every time she used her abilities, she hesitated, unsure of herself. Then there was Dante, a brash and rebellious teenager with superhuman strength. He had no problem using his powers, but his disdain for authority was palpable. Stark knew that if Dante didn't learn to channel his aggression, it would be more of a liability than an asset. Lena was different. A technopath, she could control machines and technology with her mind, something Stark found fascinating. She idolized Stark, but her abilities were volatile. One wrong thought, and she could send entire systems haywire. Finally, there was Max, the quiet one, a telepath, an empath. Max could read minds and emotions, but his sensitivity made him hesitant to engage in combat. The chaos of battle overwhelmed him, and Stark knew that unless Max learned to control his empathy, it could paralyze him when they needed him most. The first few training sessions were, in a word, a disaster. "All right, Ariel, focus," Stark said, watching as the young woman struggled to harness her light power. Her hands trembled, beams of energy flickering weakly between her fingers. "You've got to own it, don't you second-guess yourself." Ariel closed her eyes, trying to summon the power, but the light faded, and she lowered her hands in defeat. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible.
Stark sighed. "You are not going to save the world by apologizing, confidence. Remember..."
Across the room, Dante was lifting weights far beyond what any normal human could manage, but his attitude was anything but cooperative. He slammed the weights down, glaring at Stark. "What's the point of all this? You want us to follow your orders, like good little soldiers." "No thanks." Superman stepped in, his calm presence instantly diffusing the tension. We're not asking you to follow orders blindly, Dante. We're asking you to trust us, to trust each other. You have strength, but strength without purpose is dangerous. Dante scoffed, but didn't he argue? Stark and Superman exchanged a glance. They had their work cut out for them. Lena was in the corner, her hands hovering over a tablet, her brow furrowed in concentration. The device sparked and flickered as she tried to communicate with it mentally. Come on, she muttered, her frustration mounting. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered, and the machines around them hummed ominously. Stark rushed over, placing a hand on her shoulder. Hey, Lena, easy. You've got to keep it in check. Let the machine work with you, not against you. Lena took a deep breath and tried again, this time with more control. The tablet responded, displaying a holographic map. She smiled, though the effort had clearly drained her. And then there was Max. He stood apart from the others, his eyes closed, his mind reaching out to the emotions swirling around him. Stark could see the strain on his face as he struggled to separate himself from the flood of feeling. Superman approached him, his voice soft. Max, you don't have to take it all in at once. Focus on one thing, one emotion. Start there. Max nodded, trying to calm the storm within his mind. Slowly, he began to find his center, though it was clear the process wasn't easy for him. Days passed, and though the young heroes showed potential, progress was slow. The team was far from ready, and Stark knew time was running out. The energy signatures from deep space were growing stronger by the day. One evening, after a particularly rough training session, Stark and Superman sat together in the observation room, watching the young heroes as they rested. This isn't going to work, Clark, Stark said, shaking his head. They were not ready. We were not ready. Clark looked thoughtful. I don't think we were ever fully ready, Tony. Not when we started. We learned by facing challenges and making mistakes. Yeah, but we didn't have an alien fleet bearing down on us back then. This is different. It's not just about the fight, Clark said quietly. It's about showing them what it means to be a hero, to give them something to believe in. Stark stared at the younger heroes through the glass. They were all so young, so uncertain. He remembered what it was like to be that way before the armor, before the fame, and the weight of the world on his shoulders. But he had never had a mentor like Clark. Maybe that was what these kids needed, a symbol, a beacon of hope. We were running out of time, Stark muttered. 2 weeks if we were lucky. Then we make every moment count, Clark replied. They were stronger than they know. We just need to help them see it. The day came sooner than expected. Earth's early warning systems blared to life as the alien fleet entered the solar system. Stark and Superman gathered the young heroes in the war room, their faces grim as they studied the incoming ships on the holographic display. This is it, Stark said, his voice hard. They reach here. We have no choice but to fight. Ariel looked pale, her hands trembling slightly. Dante clenched his fists, his jaw tight with anger. Lena stared at the display, her mind already working on solution. Max stood silently, his face a mask of calm, though Stark could sense the turmoil beneath. "You're not ready," Ariel said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "You ready?" Superman said firmly, stepping forward. "You've trained for this. You've learned to work together. Now is the time to trust in yourselves and in each other." Dante snorted. "This isn't training. This is war." "War or not," Stark said, "you were going to face it head on because that's what we do. We don't try and back down." As the alien fleet approached, the young heroes prepared for their first real battle. Earth's defenses scrambled, deploying every available ship and soldier to intercept the invaders. But it was clear that the bulk of the fight would fall on Stark, Superman, and their new team. The heroes launched into space, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. The weight of the mission pressed down on them, but they knew there was no turning back now. The alien ships were massive, far larger than anything Earth had ever faced. Their dark hulls glistened in the void, bristling with weapons that pulsed with ominous energy. Stark led the charge, his suit gleaming in the starlight as he fired repulsor blasts at the enemy ship. Superman flew beside him, a blur of red and blue as he smashed through enemy defenses with raw, unstoppable power. But for the young heroes, the battle was overwhelming. Ariel hesitated, her energy flickering as fear gripped her. Dante charged headfirst into the fray, his strength barely controlled as he slammed into enemy soldiers, but his recklessness left him vulnerable. Lena tried to focus on disabling enemy systems, but her concentration wavered under the pressure. Max, bombarded by the emotions of the dying and wounded around him, struggled to keep his mind clear. The tide of battle quickly turned against them, Alien soldiers swarmed the heroes, and the young team found themselves outmatched, their inexperience glaring in the face of such overwhelming force. Stark and Superman intervened, driving back the enemy, but not without a cost. Several Earth defense stations were destroyed, and the casualties were mounted. Stark flew over the wreckage, scanning the battlefield below. Alien ships littered the area, some still smoldering from the barrage of Earth-sent defenses, while others continued their relentless attack. His HUD displayed the status of each team member, and the data wasn't too good. Ariel's energy levels were fluctuating, Dante's vitals were spiking from overexertion, Lena was barely managing to keep herself together, and Mech's brain activity was dangerously elevated as he struggled to process the intense emotions surrounding him. Stark knew they were hanging on by a thread. He flew closer to Ariel, her light flickering weakly as she tried to fire off beams of energy to hold back advancing enemy forces. She looked terrified, frozen in place, and for a moment Stark saw a younger version of himself, caught between fear and determination. He landed beside her, his suit clanking against the metal of the defense platform they stood on. Ariel, Stark said sharply, trying to snap her out of her panic. "You got this. Stop thinking. Just do it." She glanced at him, her eyes wide. There's too much. I can't focus." "You don't have to focus on everything," Stark said, his voice firm but calm. "Just focus on one thing. Take down that ship. Forget the rest." Ariel's breathing was shallow, but she nodded, swallowing hard. She raised her hands, palms glowing as she directed her energy at one of the smaller alien vessels. The light grew brighter, steadier, and with a sharp cry, she released it. A beam of pure energy shot toward the ship, striking its engine. The ship sputtered, then exploded in a flash of fire and debris. Ariel's chest heaved as she caught her breath, but Stark gave her a quick nod. "See, you did it. Now keep going." Meanwhile, Dante was locked in close combat with several alien soldiers. His fists hammered into them with bone-crushing force, but his wild attacks left him open to counterstrike. An enemy swung at him with a glowing blade, and Dante barely dodged, the weapon slicing through the air inches from his face. He roared in frustration, grabbing the alien by the throat and hurling it into a wall. Stark saw the recklessness in Dante's movements and activated his thrusters, flying over to him. "Dante, you need to pull it together. You can't just brute force your way through this." Dante glared at him, wiping sweat from his brow. "What else am I supposed to do? This is what I am good at." "You're strong." "Yeah." Dante looked ready to argue, but another wave of aliens approached. Stark fired a barrage of missiles, taking down several of them before turning back to Dante. "Focus. Pick your targets. Use your power wisely. Otherwise, you are going to burn out." Dante clenched his fists, but he nodded. His jaw set. He turned back to the fight, and this time, his attacks were more measured, each punch deliberate and devastating. Stark watched him for a moment, satisfied that he was starting to get the message, then took off to find the others. Lena was in the control room of one of the defense stations, her fingers moving frantically over the controls as she tried to hack into the alien system. Sweat dripped down her face as she concentrated, her eyes darting between screens filled with alien code. The lights flickered overhead, and the machines around her hummed erratically. Come on, she muttered under her breath, her connection with the alien tech slipping in and out. Stark's voice crackled over the comms. "Lena, how sets it? Looking. We need those systems down now." "I am trying," she replied, her voice tight with frustration. "Their code is different. I can get a solid lock on it." "You've got this," Stark encouraged. "You're the best technopath I've ever seen. Trust your instinct." Lena bit her lip, her mind racing. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, she let go of the controls and instead reached out with her mind, feeling the pulse of the alien system. Slowly, she began to sync with them, her connection stabilizing. There she whispered, her fingers moving across the console with renewed confidence. The alien systems flickered, then shut down, leaving several enemy ships vulnerable. Stark's voice came through again. "Nice work. Lena, keep it up." Max, however, was still struggling. He stood at the edge of the battlefield, his eyes closed as he tried to shut out the overwhelming flood of emotions crashing into him. The fear, the pain, the anger, it was too much. He could feel every death, every cry for help, and it was tearing him apart. Superman landed beside him, his cape billowing in the wind. Max, you're doing great, but you need to focus. Dante, let the emotions control you. Max shook his head, his voice trembling. I can tell it's in too much. I can feel everything. It's like drowning. Superman knelt beside him, his expression gentle. I know it's on hard, but you have to remember, you are not alone. You don't even have to carry this burden by yourself. We read all in this together. Max opened his eyes, meeting Superman, steady gaze. The calmness in Superman's voice, the unwavering strength he exuded helped ground Max. Slowly, Max began to push back the storm of emotions, focusing on the task at hand. He reached out with his mind again, but this time, instead of letting the emotions overwhelm him, he used them. He connected with his teammates, amplifying their confidence and determination. He could feel Ariel growing control, Dante's resolve, Lana says, focus. For the first time, Max felt a sense of calm within himself. Superman placed a hand on his shoulder. You've got this, we all do. The battle continued, and slowly the tide began to turn. The young heroes, guided by Stark and Superman, found their footing. They fought with renewed strength, each of them pushing past their fears and doubt. Ariel's Saragi blast became more precise, taking down enemy ships with ease. Dante's strength was focused, each strike devastating but controlled. Lena disabled more alien systems, crippling their defenses, and Max, with Superman by his side, guided the team with his mental abilities, keeping them connected and focused. But just as victory seemed within reach, a massive alien warship appeared on the horizon, larger and more imposing than any of the others. It loomed over the battlefield, casting a shadow over everything below. Stark's HUD flared with warnings. That's them command ship. He said grimly, if we don't take that down, none of this mattered. Superman nodded. We'll need to hit it from the inside, disable its control system. Stark turned to the young heroes, their faces determined despite the exhaustion. You heard him. This is it. We take down that ship, or Earth is finished. The team moved quickly, boarding one of Stark's ships and flying toward the massive alien vessel. As they approached, the ship's defenses fired at them. But Stark, as expert piloting, kept them out of harm's way. They landed in one of the ship hangars, disembarking quickly. Inside the ship was a maze of corridors and alien machinery, but Lena led the way, her technopathic abilities guiding them toward the central control room. As they moved deeper into the ship, they encountered resistance alien soldiers armed with advanced weapons. Dante charged ahead, his fists smashing through the enemy line. Ariel followed, her energy blasts clearing a path. Max stayed close to Lena, using his telepathy to sense any incoming threats, while Superman and Stark provided support, taking down enemies with precision. They reached the control room and Lena immediately set to work hacking into the ship system. Sweat dripped down her face as she concentrated, the alien code more complex than anything she'd encountered before. But Stark was beside her, guiding her, and slowly she began to make progress. The control room says defenses activated and alien drones swarmed toward them. Ariel and Dante fought them off, but the drones kept coming, their numbers overwhelming. Lena, we need that system down now, Stark shouted, firing at the approaching drone. I am almost there, Lena replied, her voice strained. Max could feel the tension rising, the fear creeping into the team, smiling. He reached out with his telepathy, calming them, steadying their nerves. Finally, with a triumphant cry, Lena broke through the alien system. The control room lights flickered, then dimmed as the ship's defenses went offline. We did it. Lena breathed, her hands shaking from the effort. Stark smiled beneath his helmet. Nice work, kid. But the victory was short-lived. A deep rumble echoed through the ship, and Stark's HUD flared with red alert. The ship's self-destruct sequence just activated. We've got less than 5 minutes to get out of here. Superman stepped forward, his face calm but determined. You all go, I'll stay and disable the core. Stark shook his head. No way, Kent. We do this together. There's no time, Superman replied. I can move faster than any of you. I'll handle it. The young heroes looked at each other, torn between following orders and helping Superman. But Stark nodded, his voice grim. Go get back to the ship. We'll meet you there. The team hesitated for a moment, but then they ran, making their way back through the corridors toward the hangar. Superman flew toward the core, his superhuman speed a blur as he raced against time. As the young heroes boarded their ship, The alien vessel began to shake, the countdown ticking closer to 0. Stark watched the clock, his heart pounding in his chest. They had seconds left. Finally, Superman appeared, flying into the ship just as the alien vessel erupted in a blinding explosion. They barely made it out, the shockwave sending their ship tumbling through space. But when the dust settled, the alien fleet was gone, a command ship destroyed. Earth was safe. For now.